Bilateral integration essentially is about having the two hemispheres in the brain completely connected to give you the most brain power and access to all of your abilities that you can get. That's based on physical exercises and really put the human being together physically so that I can move freely, I can move automatically, I can move efficiently, I can move with rhythm, so I can multi-process and I can multitask.
When I look at what I see here, it's completely different from what I see back home in Nigeria. There's literally a day I don't see a child because of my experience, what I have read, what I have seen. I know that this child is struggling. I see more of that here, but not what I experienced back home. I'm seeing like an epidemic here.
In Nigeria, parents have children who have these special needs or require this special support, but because of the way the culture within those environments see that particular situation, they try to hide away those children from the society. You find the mom, especially the mom with the child, in prayer houses.
The World Health Organization developed something called 24-hour movement behaviors.
Wow.
So there are guidelines for all age bands from birth through to 65 years of age. So let's take 5 to 18-year-olds. 5 to 18-year-olds should sleep for an average of 8 hours of quality sleep and have regular sleep and wake times. In other words, go to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every morning. The second factor is physical activity, and every 5 to 18-year-old should be achieving 60 minutes of something called moderate to vigorous physical activity each day.
At the end of the day, we all die. At the end of the day, when you do all this, at the end of the day, even some footballers who are very active, some athletes who are very active and so on, some of them even suffer cardiac arrest and die on the pitch. So sometimes I get confused.
The one thing that's true, the moment we're born, we're already on our way to dying.
Welcome. This is an interesting evening, and you would agree with me that at the end of this discussion today, it's going to be a very interesting and very educative one, because we have a well-learned, a well-connected, and a well-versed guest in our house today. How much do you know about neurodiversity? And how do you think physical activities, physical exercises helps to balance your neurological composition? So on this note, I want to welcome us to Glasscast podcast. Like I said earlier, it's going to be a very interesting episode. And if you have your glass of water, like I do, please bring it closer. Or if you have your bucket of popcorn, it will be nice to have it around, because it's going to be, like I said again, interesting. If you have your pen and paper, I think it's something you need to have, because we have Dr. Andy in the house, and Dr. Andy would give us a lot of inspiring insights about neurodiversity and physical exercises and activities that support individuals who would benefit from such activity. So, Dr. Andy, you are welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much to both of you for the opportunity and for the invite onto your podcast. Excited to be invited. I'm very happy to be part of the family for today and for the journey forward. But yeah, neurodiversity and neurodevelopment and all these things are things that I'm passionate about, very excited about. And I'll be happy to share as many bits of advice or guidance I can to your listeners moving forward. And maybe by the end there'll be more questions as well as answers. And we can come back and do it again another time maybe.
Yeah, Dr. Andy, thank you so much. You guys have been seeing our faces. Today I'm not going to be espousing legal points and legal positions. I'll also be learning myself here, sitting beside a man who has 2 doctorate degrees. So let's fire on right away. Dr. Andy, you have 2 doctorate degrees. Could you please tell our viewers in what area that you've majored?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the story of how I came to be Dr. Andy, I suppose, and to do what I did. Originally, I was actually a teacher of physical education. That was my first degree. I've always been interested in teaching and enhancing other people's lives, touching other people's life in a positive way that makes their future as good as it can be. I recognise that in teaching, we're very restricted because of policies, procedures, and it's quite frustrating as a teacher when you're enthusiastic and you want to give it your best, but certain systems restrict your ability to do that. So I stepped out of teaching and took up a position as a teaching assistant in the University of Glasgow. And there I started to research the links between birth, the pregnancy itself, and the first few years of development to really see if there was any history in there as to why certain children that I used to teach were struggling more than others. And that was the really start of it. That's where the concept of it all and the interest really sparked off. I came across an organisation called INPP, which is the Institute for Neurophysiological Psychology. And I was very interested in their work. A guy called Dr. Peter Blythe, who originated the foundation, the institute. And I was lucky and fortunate enough to train with him and his wife, Sally Goddard Blythe, in something called neurodevelopment, which is basically looking at movements babies make in that first year of life. And if they don't make them in the right way or at the right level of time, or they go through phases too quickly, or they pass by developmental phases, there are gaps, therefore, in learning and development, which therefore restricts that ability to move forward and achieve their full potential. And that can manifest in a number of different ways. It could be learning problems, it could be behavioural problems, it could be difficulties with something called self-regulation, which is your ability to make the right decisions and to solve problems and all these higher thinking skills. And not many people understand that the basis of all of that to get a good start in life is physical movement. That's the start of it all. So, fascinated by this field, I did a year's postgrad with Dr. Peter Blythe and Sally, learned my trade from a neurodevelopmental perspective from them. And then I went on further to do other courses with other very well-learned peoples. And one of them was my personal boss and mentor at the time, Mrs. Sheila Dobie. And she originated something called bilateral integration, which is something that I'm known for internationally now as being the go-to guy. I've set up academies across Europe where there's other people delivering the training to teachers, psychologists, and other therapists. And then I'll visit these countries once or sometimes twice a year to update with further research and so on. So that's been an interesting field as well. I do sound therapy for children with auditory processing difficulties. So these are children who their hearing is perfectly fine, they can hear okay, but they can't understand and recall and store and organise the information that they get from the ears, and therefore it can present itself in things like speech delays, confusing of similar sounding words, the need for constant repetition, or even the slow speed of processing. So that's been a good area too. And I learned sound therapy by a guy called Dr. Kelt Johansson, something called the Johansson Individualized Auditory Stimulation Program. That's another part of the journey. Thereafter, I did an MEd through Open University, specialising in special educational needs in particular. And the Open University was a great thing to go through. Very well organised, very structured, very supportive. Really enjoyed the time there. I did an MPhil at the University of Strathclyde, which then transferred into the PhD at the University of Edinburgh. And thereafter, I've done lots of other professional qualifications. So things like, for example, ADOS-2, which is an assessment tool that's used to diagnose autism or ADHD, for example. Yeah. So there's been quite a lot of things along the way. But the greatest thing is the PhD I did in something called BMT, which is Better, Movers and Thinkers. And I guess the best way to think about that intervention is to look at everything I've done in the past and how do I bring it all together and then put it as one whole jigsaw piece, if you like. And that's been probably the best achievement in my life, other than birthing my 3 daughters, I think. So,
that's a very long CV indeed. Yeah, congratulations and thank you so much. We are indeed lucky to have you in this podcast.
Exactly.
Let me take you on. When you are introducing your long list of qualifications, you mentioned something bilateral integration. could you please educate us and educate our viewers what bilateral integration means?
It would be a pleasure. Bilateral integration is just a fantastic intervention that I love. Bilateral integration essentially is about having the two hemispheres in the brain completely connected to give you the most brain power and access to all of your abilities that you can get. Bilateral integration is considered about 3 midlines in the human body. So you have a vertical midline that separates left from right, a horizontal midline separating upper from lower, and then a lateral separating front from back. And those 3 midlines are also connected to the 3 semicircular canals in our ears, which is our balance system or where we are. So if you're not bilaterally integrated, how you navigate your life's journey becomes increasingly more difficult. So bilateral integration is an intervention that's based on physical exercises that start very simple and then become very, very complex and really put the human being together physically so that I can move freely, I can move automatically, I can move efficiently, I can move with rhythm. And because I'm doing it all in the background, my cognitive system can then think about other things at the same time. So I can multi-process and I can multitask. And that's what bilateral integration is.
Wow, this is this is very, very technical. So, if my understanding is right on your explanation, is ability of the 2 sides of the brain to coordinate and do tasks effectively or multitask where multitasking is required.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, let me take it a step further. What is the relationship between this bilateral integration and neurodevelopment?
So bilateral integration and neurodevelopment. Neurodevelopment is based on the principle of something called primitive and postural reflexes. So in utero, and whilst we're being born, and after we've been born, babies move, but have no control over it at all. Every movement the baby makes is automatic based on stimulation. So for example, if you put your hand in the palm of a baby, the very first thing the baby will do is close very quickly around this. This is called a palmar reflex. And there's a whole host of these primitive reflexes that are there when we're born. Their primary purpose is survival. They help us cope with life. Their secondary goal is to connect our brains with our body so that babies begin to realize that their hands actually they belong to them. These are mine. And then they begin to use it by picking things up and typically throwing things is what babies do next. But what that then allows for is the development of thumb and finger articulation for fine motor skill to develop. So neurodevelopment is all about, if you like, the bare essentials, the foundations of movement. And immediate from the brain stem, the lowest level of function that we have. In 3.5 years, postural reflexes then become established, which allow us to move a bit more freely and automatically. And they mediate from midbrain. So what bilateral integration does is puts the top clever part of cognition on top of that foundation, giving us a whole system from front to back, top to bottom, and left to right, making it an integrated system. So bilateral integration and neurodevelopment, they work hand in hand together perfectly.
Okay, where there is no proper bilateral integration, does that affect the neurodevelopment, or does the neurodevelopment affect bilateral integration? How does it work? Which one comes first, or how do they complement each other?
I think that if we look at it before you're born, I would say neurodevelopment comes first.
Okay.
Once you're born, they both function collectively at the same time. And that's because our sensory systems have been switched on. Gravity has taken its full force. And so I have to learn to cope in those circumstances. But whilst in utero, whilst inside, these primitive reflexes allow me to move, allow me to grow, allow me to develop, and they allow me to make sure that I'm facing the right way when it's time to be born. So neurodevelopment has to start before we're born, but bilateral integration and neurodevelopment come collectively together the moment we're brought into the world.
Wow.
Interesting. Okay. I know. The son of Glasscast podcast will have further questions, and like I said earlier, if you don't have your pen and paper, you need to bring it closer because you see more of these terms coming up, and you have the opportunity also to let us know in the comment section some of these terms that you find a bit confusing, and we'll go back to Dr. Andy, the double doc, to get the right response that you require. I will let Oscar take over.
Okay. My question is this: what are the signs that the bilateral integration is not proper?
So there's a number of different markers that would let us identify if a child is properly wired together.
Okay.
So for example, we mentioned earlier on something called self-regulation, the ability to manage your emotions, to manage your behaviour, to make the right choices. Now that choice could be a simple thing like, instead of a packet of crisps, I'm going to take an apple for lunch today. Instead of getting the lift to floor 3, I'm going to use the stairs. Just healthy choices for your body and healthy choices for your mind. And that's really what self-regulation is trying to achieve, is putting us into a position where we can make the right choices at the right time for the right reason. So some of the markers are the kids who are not able to do that, or who are making the same bad decisions time and time and time again. Something we refer to as habitual behaviour. So even if you just consider some of the children that you may or may not know, you might look at some of their behavioural patterns and go, something's not quite right there, despite good opportunities. Other opportunities to recognise, other markers, are where a child isn't achieving some developmental milestones. So for example, babies should be able to sit up unassisted by the age of 6 months. They should be on their hands and knees by 9 months and crawling on hands and knees. Then by 12 to 18 months, standing up on 2 feet and walking. So these are known as developmental milestones. Some children achieve them early, which it can be a problem. Some achieve them late, which is definitely a problem. And so these are nice little markers to recognise those who are maybe at a higher level of difficulty compared to those who are achieving those milestones. Now, I make it sound very simple like that. It's not quite as simple as that. So in the clinic, for example, we have a variety of tests that we use: physical tests, sensory tests, cognitive tests.
So before you get in there, let me just ask a simple one. You've mentioned the milestones from age 3 to 6, 6 to 9. For a typical 5 to 8-year-old, what are the things that could be a red flag?
Good. So 5 to 8. 5 is an interesting age because certainly in the United Kingdom it's when formal schooling starts. So some of the common traits that people panic about with 5 and 6-year-olds is they are reversing their letters, so writing the letters back to front or writing the numbers back to front. But at the age of 5 or 6, that's quite natural. That's not unusual. If at 7 years of age, 8 years of age, they continue to do those reversals, then that's a red flag for sure. Things like, for example, not able to dress themselves, can't do their buttons very well, can't tie their shoelaces. Even to the bare foundations of some 5-year-olds are going to school still having to wear underwear that protects them from wetting themselves and stuff because they've not matured that system yet. So there are some very key flags that can be identified. Poor attention, poor concentration, poor listening skills, poor organisation. These are the signs that are there to be seen that can help identify a potential problem that a child might present with from 5 to 8 years of age. Even things like not able to socially interact with their peers. So the way that develops is that very much as toddlers, we play out by ourselves, then we play beside somebody, and then we play with somebody. And that's their trajectory. So if at 5, 6, 7, and 8, they're still wanting to just play on their own, it's another social indicator that something's not quite right.
Okay. You want to say something?
Yeah, if I want to come in here, I know some of our regular followers and subscribers have heard of some of the terms you have mentioned, and when we talk about neurodiversity here, is like a spectrum of activities that impact maybe human development and all that. And I remember you mentioned autism, you mentioned ADHD, and when you talked about the writing skills at certain stage, I think that it's kind of ignite that idea of dyslexia in that sense. So I want to understand how these activities are interlinked to kind of buttress further the idea of neurodiversity in individuals.
I mean, neurodiversity is, in essence, the best way to describe that is we're all different. We have similar markers, similar milestones and things we would want to recognise to see that development's going okay. But every one of us is unique. There's one of us in the entire world, that's it. But there are some common threads. What neurodiversity is doing, in essence, it's trying to get the world to embrace that difference, to recognise that we aren't all expected to be the same, but there are some similarities. Silly things like social conformity. Like, we all drive in the UK on the left side of the road. There's a reason for that. It's to keep us all safe.
Yeah.
You know, so there are some social conformative behaviours that are there for our own safety and well-being. Diversity, neurodiversity, is recognising that I can follow those social conformations, but I do things in a slightly different way from everybody else. For example, when you sit down to have your dinner and you have a knife and a fork, the world expects you to have the fork in your left hand and the knife in your right hand.
Yeah.
Why? Why?
I have no idea. Well, the culture, maybe what has been instilled in us.
Some of it is definitely cultural, that's for sure, what's steered you. Because if you go to some Arabic countries, for example, where it's very much they use their hands with rice and breads and so on. So yes, it is culturally. But let's say in the Western world, it's very much the fork on the left and the knife on the right. And it stems from the bourgeois culture from many, many decades ago. Because it's all Latin derivative. So the left is sinistra, is left, and sinister is the derivative of the word sinister. The devil's fork was always 3 prongs, and the devil always had it in his left hand. So because of these historical moments, that's why we have to socially conform and have the fork on the left and the knife on the right. Now, I'm not a sinister guy at all, but I socially conform like everybody else. But when you think about it, to come back to the neurodiversity, if I put them in the other hands, but I'm still eating my dinner, does it matter? And that's really what neurodiversity is trying to say. Like, we should stop sweating about the small stuff, embrace the difference, and get on with our lives and be there for one another.
Now, the another question I want to ask, I should have asked this question earlier, but no time is late in this kind of discussion.
It's just things are moving too fast. Honestly, I'm mesmerized.
I am as well. Sometimes I'm lost with some of the terminologies used.
But before you go on, like our anchor, erudite anchor is lost. I know some of our viewers, if you are lost, please go to the comment section. Whatever is it that you need for the explanation, put it there. We will get the answers from you. We may not have the answers, but we have our guest here who is willing and able to even come again and to provide answers if we follow up. So go to the comment section, like, subscribe, share, and comment, and we'll get you all the answers to the technical jargons that we've been, putting out here this evening.
And if you don't have your pen and paper already, just try as much as possible before I ask this question. Get your pen and paper, note them down, put them in the comment section like Oscar have said, and we'll pick it up, go back to the double doc we have in the house, and he will give us the further explanation. Doc, I want to, sometimes when you want to look at a problem, although neurodiversity as we are presenting it here is not a problem, but there are root causes to all this. I know, we've talked about the different stages of human life when they were in the, inside the womb, when they're giving birth to, and various stages of development. So what do you think contributes to this condition that make it possible for individuals to act, differently based on their diverse neurological development?
I think we would... I think I would lean back onto my recent positions at the University of Strathclyde and the University of Edinburgh. So I'm an associate tutor at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm a research associate at the University of Strathclyde.
Okay.
And so we work with humanities and social sciences, and that's just the faculty that I work under. And we do an awful lot of work on physical activity for health promotion, and we refer to something called behaviour change, which is like a theoretical framework that tries to understand why, as you say, some people find things more difficult than others. And there are many, many different things that make that happen. For example, the pregnancy itself. If the mother is very ill, for example, very poorly, perhaps she smokes while pregnant, or she takes alcohol when pregnant, that will have an impact on the developing fetus and then for the baby that then arrives into the world. If, for example, she's faced with very much high levels of anxiety or stress, which might be a social thing caused by domestic violence, for example, or other ugly situations like this, naturally that has an impact on the mother, and again through the placental barrier, it'll influence the baby's growth and development even at that early stage. So one of the things is what we refer to as genetics. So genetics can impact on that individual in those circumstances. So that's one thing. The second thing that you've got is opportunities. So when you're born, if you come from a very low social demographic background, so not so wealthy, struggling to have one meal next to the other, maybe the warmth of your house is not so great, those social things greatly influence your development, greatly influence your opportunity, and greatly influence the decisions you make in the world, because you might have a family that also struggles with conforming. But as you're growing up, that to you is very normative. That's normal. That's what you think life is. So you'll make the same decisions, behave the same way because of those circumstances. For example, if I'm a parent, which I am, and I'm not very physically active, and I just sit down all day, my children are growing up thinking that's the norm. So they won't want to be physically active either. It influences their decisions. So then we talk about not just genetics, but the environment that's around that child. Yeah. And the environment has a huge impact on these things that you suggest.
So let me ask now. Well, Dr. Eze, like you suggested, we should get pen and paper. So now what I'm taking from this is that if you are about to get pregnant, a mother, or if you're pregnant, there are things you should avoid which would not help your pregnancy, like smoking, drinking, some bad habits.
Eating unhealthy food.
Eating unhealthy food. That's very, very interesting. What I want to ask is, for the one that is caused genetically, what are the kind of things that might happen inside? Because when we talk about the genetic aspect of this, there are the things that happen inside the body.
The DNA.
The DNA. I'm not an expert in the DNA. I know the other time when we talked about sickle cell, we know it affects the DNA system and so on. So do you have an idea of things that could happen in the system that would result to this anomaly? Or is this something that could be, diagnosed on the parents before they have a baby to be treated?
Well, there's definitely, again, indicators and markers. Let's give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
And give your subscribers a couple of examples. If there are high anxiety levels, for example, the mother's prone to having high anxiety, maybe the father as well, then typically the brain of that individual will set out a whole bunch of hormones, which are stress hormones, at a very high level, like flood the body with it. This growing baby, therefore, gets this understanding that I have to also produce this high level of stress hormones. So the baby is born, essentially, stressed already. Now, that would be like a genetic influence, potentially. But what's also important is we have what's called gene expression. So that's where you can have those genetics which aren't in your favour when you're born, but if the right environment is around you, then how the genes bounce off that environment and interact with that environment is how you can influence positively that individual circumstance. So whilst genetics give us our eye colour and our hair colour, if you have hair, and other things like this.
I think I still have some. What are you?
Nope, it's gone for a while now, Oscar. It's not been there for a while. I think this is definitely genetics. That's for sure. But there's certainly moments where, again, if the environment around the child is very positive and provides good opportunities, good education, good understanding, you can counteract some of the, let's call them bad genetics, and you can make them not influence that child's future moving forward. But that's all about having the right support in place.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you would agree with us that this discussion is also giving us that note of caution. So if you are the man who has a pregnant woman in the house, you need to learn to make sure you are caring for that woman in a very special way, because you are not just caring for the woman, you are also caring for the baby, the offspring that is about to come up. Also, if you are a child and your mom is expecting a baby, don't cause your mom too much stress, so that your little one coming up would, come happily and everything would work in order. So every person around the environment of that pregnant lady, you have to take a note of caution. Make sure that the environment is safe for the pregnant woman, not just for the woman, but for the offspring that is coming in that process. And if I may ask question, Doc,
please.
I'm not going political here, but if I may,
you are going political. This one, you are definitely going political. I know you.
I will try not to.
Okay.
So recently, the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, made some statement about how certain medications that women take during pregnancy also are linked to these neurological conditions. Although medical experts and others in the field have disputed what was put through there, I want to know what your position is.
I think my position on pregnant women having medication is, I think we all have to stop, breathe, pause, and think, why is the medication being used? For what purpose? So, for example, it's not unusual for females, again, mostly in the Western world, because of the climate that we have, to have low levels of iron and stuff in their system. And there's often the need for folic acid to be something, supplementations that they would take to try to counteract that. So there are some medical interventions which have been clinically proven to be beneficial under those circumstances for pregnant women and safe for their babies as well. It's why we mention things like alcohol use, tobacco use, because those are drugs that you're taking into your system which are not beneficial to you and definitely not beneficial to your child. But my position on medication is exactly that. We have very strict and stringent rules in the UK about medications from pharmaceutical companies. They've all been tried and tested under the correct ethical conditions so that we can recommend, or the doctors can recommend, the medication that's appropriate for each individual circumstance, rather than a one-size-fits-all. I think that there's more knowledge we need to gain on these things. I think the world's changing, and I think we have to move forward with that. Politically, I think the politicians need to move forward too. And I think President Trump, as well as many other world leaders, are very good at talking a good game, but not very in touch with the root cause and the foundations of society and what society actually really needs. And I'll give you an example. The NHS in England spent something like £1.92 billion on type 2 diabetes treatment last year. And yet the cure for most people with type 2 diabetes, not all, but for most, is a 10-minute walk every day, which is free of charge.
Free of charge.
Costs nothing at all.
Especially in England, not in Scotland.
Right.
Because
well, actually, Scotland spent £585 million last year on type 2 diabetes treatment. And this isn't just about the medication that's being used to help blood sugar levels. It's also about therapies and other things, okay? That's why the number is so high. But again, it's important to recognise that if we advocate these people and we prescribe them a 10-minute walk every day, Scotland would save £585,000 a year, and England would save 1.92 billion.
Some contractors will go bankrupt. And some pharmaceutical companies will close down.
Why I said England, not Scotland, you know what the weather is like in Scotland. And sometimes the weather discourages people to go out for walk.
Yeah, but there's no such thing in Scotland as bad weather, just the wrong clothes.
Let's not go too far. Let me take on the issue of autism you mentioned. I was researching is like there's an epidemic of autism currently, because I checked between 2015/2016 and 2022/2023 in England there is an increase of 127% of children that require education, health and care that is related to autism. There is 141% increase in the number of children with special education needs related to autism in England. In Scotland, from ages of 5 to 17, that is the school age in Scotland, there is 4.7% of children that have special needs that's linked to autism. In the world entirely, for every 127 person, there is one linked to autism. In England is I think 16 point something. Then in Scotland is about 20 something percent in terms of autism. So is a case of the epidemic is alarming, and it seems like we don't take note of this. And I'm just wondering what could be the cause of this astronomical increase within a space of this time.
Yeah, well, if we relate it specifically to autistic spectrum disorder, it's a spectrum, so it's a range. It's like a measuring tape. And really what you have is from autism, which is low-functioning non-verbal, to high-functioning verbal autism, and all the range in between. I think that the testing protocols for evaluating autism have become better at identifying kids with autistic behaviours. You have something called the DSM-5 and the ICD-11. These are two international catalogues that stipulate what criteria would an individual have to meet to be given a diagnosis of autism.
Okay.
And that criteria is based out of past research and current research. So it's not just made up by some person that seemed to have an idea. This is something that's really been researched time and time again. I think the increase in autism is partly due to us getting better at assessing and evaluating those circumstances. However, I think there are more situations here. So for example, there have people who genuinely have autism, who genuinely need support and genuinely need care. We have other individuals who have a diagnosis, but actually don't merit having that diagnosis, but it gives them an easier journey moving forward. That's the principle. And I think that's why we have an increase the way that we have. But there's another factor. We talked about genetics earlier on, and in autism, the research shows that the older the mother and father are, the higher the chance of autism, because of the quality of the sperm and the quality of the egg, and then the quality of that mother's body over 9 months to produce and deliver a beautiful child. So most people now in society, when my mum and dad were at school, they met each other, fell in love, and then when they finished school, my dad went to work, my mother was a housewife, and they had my older brother and myself, my two younger brothers, at a very early age, in their 20s, when their bodies were young, healthy, fit, strong, and so the quality of sperm, the quality of the egg was good. In society now, the cost of childcare is huge. The cost of living is huge. So people are having to have careers first and then children after. So most people now are having children, their first child, when they're in their 30s. Well, that's 30-year-olds is actually, from a physiological perspective, not old, but it's not young. So again, the increase in autism may also be linked to the fact that people have to develop careers to have financial security before then having children. So I think that's a contributing factor as well.
So you mentioned two factors now, the testing protocol being more effective. But I think, and also mentioned people delaying to have kids, which is not
an economic factor,
because of economic factors, and then tend to produce unhealthy kids or that have these medical conditions. But I do think I probably have a slightly different view, even though I'm not an expert in this.
We like when there are different views. That's good.
In this area. When I look at, even though I'm still going to come ask that as a question, when I look at what I see here, it's completely different from what I see back home in Nigeria. There's literally a day I don't go out. I don't see a child because of my experience, what I have read, what I have seen. I know that this child is struggling, either with the issue of bilateral integration or neurodevelopment or neurodiversity, whatever it is. So it's something even in churches, you see it. But before I came here in Nigeria, I don't think we see that kind of things. I don't know how to link that, even though I don't need to test a child to know that, yeah, there is something wrong. I see more of that here, but not, what I experienced back home. So that's why I'm saying, even without the testing, I could identify, and I'm seeing like an epidemic here. So it confuses my confusion, according to Nigerian grammar.
I mean, I think the confusion that's there, I understand it. There are definitely, probably a large part of my job in the clinic is observing people moving. Mm-hmm. And you can learn a lot by how somebody sits, how they move, how they interact. You can get a gauge of that. Human beings have been doing that for as long as they've been on planet Earth. So the reality is that if you become very astute at being able to observe and recognize human behavior, then I totally agree with you, Oscar. I think you can already identify those individuals who are presenting with some level of difficulty. Now, whether that's autism or dyslexia or just underachievement, for example, or they socially feel awkward, you can identify these things in individuals. What the diagnosis does is puts a label on the child, but that then gives that child the right to access special support and special care. You mentioned the EHCP in England. It's the Educational Healthcare Plan.
Yeah.
So if I want my child to get the right support educationally, I almost have to have the diagnosis to facilitate that. Days gone by, you didn't have to have that. People just knew you were needing help and they offered you the help. But it's become such a political process and an economical process that's the way that we're moving forward. And I think that it's creating bigger gaps between the reality of what a child needs and the reality of what that child then gets.
So if I would pick up from what Oscar said here, because looking at your biography, you also have linked to international development partners like the UNESCO, and from that lens of international partnership, I would want to ask a question before I say what I wanted to say relating to what Oscar was referring to. So, because most of the analysis, most of the studies, most of the testings we see mostly are within the Western hemisphere. And I want to know, with your connection with maybe UNESCO or international development agencies, what is your observation about testing, analysis of this situation for young people within the global South, like non-Western societies? What is your assessment?
My assessment is that you have the World Health Organization as the kind of overarching category for everything to do with health and education in the world. So they're responsible for pretty much every country, basically. There are different levels of engagement from different parts of the world for a variety of reasons. But in terms of the studies, as much as I agree, a lot of it is based on Western philosophy or Western academic researchers, but these Western academics are also studying in all the corners of the world. So there are lots of studies in lots of different cultures and lots of different nations that tie into this humanities and social sciences that I mentioned at Strathclyde University and Edinburgh University with the physical activity for health. So I don't think that the situations of how you observe things in Nigeria, for example, compared to Scotland, are completely different. But that's cultural. There's a reason for that. The history of Nigeria and the history of Scotland, completely different. So you can't come in with the same set of rules to different cultures and expect to get the same thing. It's not possible. You have to really embrace it on an individual basis. I think research could do a lot more in terms of trying to individualize different cultures, different countries, to better understand the real picture that research is presenting. And then what we'd be able to do is put the right interventions in place to support those countries to do a better job.
Yeah, and so, when you're talking about interventions here, and so I said I would link to what Oscar is saying. I don't know how much those interventions have done in terms of or how they perform in terms of communication across culture. Because what we notice, like in societies like in Nigeria, we have our subscribers and our followers in Nigeria. In fact, I have worked with some organizations in Nigeria that are supporting young people that have these challenges. And one of them that I have been close to, I've spoken to, one of the things they are linking to non-existence or maybe limited existence of these cases within the Nigerian environment is mainly cultural. Parents have children who have these special needs or require this special support, but because of the way the culture within those environments see that particular situation, they try to hide away those children from the society. So you don't see them commonly, or alternatively, you find the mom, especially the mom with the child, in prayer houses. So that is where this problem will be solved through miracle, through prayers. So they keep them there and they keep praying for them instead of offering them more research and technical based support that would allow that child to enjoy that level of independence they require. So in terms of, I don't know if you have witnessed some of the things I'm referring to here, and I know it's not typical to Nigeria alone. If you go to Ghana, most African countries and some Asian countries where all these things are prevalent as well. Do you have experience in this area?
Yeah, I do actually. I've travelled all over the world with work, which is really a nice thing to be able to sit here and say. It's like, for me, it's a blessing that I never thought this little boy from a town called Dunfermline in Scotland would travel around the world and do this job.
Dunfermline is historical. It's not a small town. It's historical because I've learnt a lot about Dunfermline, but let's not go there.
I think it's important to recognise Dunfermline was actually Scotland's original capital city before Edinburgh. Yeah, it was, yeah. And King Charles, he made Dunfermline a city this year.
And Dunfermline,
I think it has a seaport or something, Dunfermline.
Yeah, it has the dockyard in a place called Rosyth.
Okay.
Yeah, my father used to work as a shipwright.
And the history of steel industry in the world has its roots in Dunfermline, if I'm right.
Yeah, a man called Andrew Carnegie. That's right. Yeah,
so let's not go too far away.
But to bring it back to my experience in different countries, yes. For example, I used to have a clinic in Dubai, and I would go to Dubai every 6 weeks, and I would work with the children there. And that's a mixture of expat community as well as the local Emirati community as well. And you can really see the cultural differences between what the Emirati parents are expecting from their child and from me as their doctor, compared to how the expat community are anticipating that. Even the differences from things like African nations who are living there and bringing their children to see me. So I have seen a great diversity in terms of populations. If we look at the Asian community, the Chinese in particular, they have a different stance on childhood and things as well. So I think that's my point about the research, is that you have to embrace those differences and recognise them for what they are. If a mother believes that going to a prayer house with her child is going to help her child, then that's a positive thing, because the mother's trying to do something to move their child's life forward.
Exactly.
Could they be doing more than that? Possibly. But I think we also have to look at it on an individual basis. If it's a single mum with one child, not a lot of money, not a lot of hope, the first thing I would do if I was in that circumstance is get on my knees, look up to the sky and just ask for some kind of divine intervention, just something to make it better. It's about trying to empower the parents to better understand what they can do for their child, so they do that for their child and their child's life moves forward. But if the parent doesn't know, we can't criticise them for what they don't know. This is where the organisations like the World Health Organization, UNESCO, international partners need to do a better job of empowering and educating parents to make the right decisions for their child, regardless of the cultural influence that has.
Interesting. And that is why we are having this conversation today. And you would agree with me that it's been a very interesting episode, and we count it as a blessing to have Dr. Andy here. And don't go away yet, because we have more to discuss within the time we have.
Let me ask a layman's question. We've talked about layman's question. We've talked about we mentioned autism, we mentioned ADHD somewhere along the line. There is other DCD, developmental cooperation disorder.
Yep.
Yeah. So all these conditions, are they curable or something the child will have to live till adulthood? Is there a way that they can be cured?
So there's not a cure for any of those things, okay? Because it's not like an illness that can be treated with medication or change of diet or something. So you can't cure somebody of neurodiversity. What you can do is give them the best chance to make sure that that neurodiversity works positively for them rather than works against them. For example, a kid with dyslexia, that's to be celebrated. That's like a superpower. Because of the way that they find literacy, in particular, difficult, what they do have is talents and strengths in other areas. So, for example, they can solve problems in ways that we can't even possibly fathom. We don't see the solution. Typically, dyslexic individuals have this innate ability of finding those solutions that we can't find. There are lots of really amazing talents that every neurodiverse person has that makes them really great. And rather than try to fix them, it's better to make sure they can actually regulate and use their talent in a way that's purposeful for society. For example, autistic individuals, remarkable at processing numbers, for example, or data, recognizing patterns. There are jobs in the world where they are perfectly placed for somebody with that level of autism to do that job better than us who are not neurodivergent, if you like. So again, I think it's not about curing.
Okay.
It's about understanding the nature of the condition, the level and impact that condition's having on that individual, and where can we dampen down the negative and strengthen the positive attributes that brings.
Okay.
If I may come in here, I would want to ask, because there's a very important aspect that we have not addressed. Where does physical exercise come in?
I was going to go in that direction. Thank you so much.
It's a perfect example. If you're not fast, you're last.
Especially when you are with Dr. Eze, you have to be really, really fast. Otherwise, you look ordinary before him.
So physical exercise, physical movement, physical activity, it's the root to all things. So for example, movement is a baby's first language. So if the baby's not moving well, the rest of life becomes much harder to facilitate. We talked about neurodevelopment occurring in the womb, the baby moving a lot whilst in the womb, and then getting ready to be born with its head first, which is a really important thing to do. So that birth becomes as natural as Mother Nature intended. So movement is at the root of everything that we do right now. Our ability to sit, to listen, to see, to taste, to smell has its root cause in our ability to balance and move. So if I want to stimulate my brain, there are many ways I can do that. I can watch a movie, I can sing a song, I can eat some nice food. There are lots of ways to do it. But the most effective way to influence the connections between one neurological connection and another is physical movement. So in the absence of movement, I'm not really firing up my brain as much as I could.
Right.
And that's where physical activity then really does its job well. The more I move, the healthier I am from a cardiovascular perspective. So if I've got good hearts and good lungs, the chances are my brain is going to then send out all the happy hormones around my body. Things like serotonin and dopamine, for example. Things that just make you feel good. And if I feel good, I have more clarity in my understanding, I have more clarity in my thoughts, allow me to make better decisions. So physical activity, physical exercise is the most effective way to encourage the brain to connect in the most appropriate way to strengthen up all your abilities.
Okay, I read something the other time. You know, I read a lot. I delve into so many things.
I'm learning from
Only
you.
that some of the things I'm reading, my wife is not impressed with some of them. But not in a bad sense. She would prefer me to read more of scripture and the Bible. But I read everything.
Maybe you are reading more of how to be stingy.
No.
How not to spend the money.
No, with my wife. My wife has everything I have. Anyway, that's an aside. What I want to ask is I said I read something some time ago that exercising and working out can cut the risk of every ailment, sickness by a certain percentage. Is that true with your experience?
Yeah, it's very true. So the World Health Organization developed something called 24-hour movement behaviors.
Wow.
So there are guidelines for all age bands from birth through to 65 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take 5 to 18-year-olds. 5 to 18-year-olds should sleep for an average of 8 hours of quality sleep and have regular sleep and wake times. In other words, go to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every morning. So one of the factors is sleep. The second factor is physical activity. And every 5 to 18-year-old should be achieving 60 minutes of something called moderate to vigorous physical activity each day.
60 minutes of exercise each day.
60 minutes each day. Now, that doesn't have to be an hour block. It can be 6 lots of 10 minutes, for example. It can be 2.5 hours. It can be 3 20 minutes. But in a 24-hour period, they should have at least an hour of moderate to vigorous physical activity. In a week, 3 of those days should be vigorous physical activity. That's the stuff where you're running and you're out of breath and you can't talk to the person next to you. That's the level of activity we're talking. Moderate would be where we're running next to each other, jogging, walking, whatever, and we can talk to each other and have a sentence and then say another sentence again. That's the kind of moderate activity, all right? So again, for 5 to 18-year-olds, 60 minutes every day. That's the second factor. The third factor is something called sedentary behavior. In other words, what we're doing right now, sitting. And you're trying to break up long periods of sitting throughout every single day. And then on top of that is something called sedentary screen time. So the recommendation is no more than 2 hours of recreational screen time use in every 24-hour period. So there are things that the World Health Organization has brought to fruition, brought to reality, to try to encourage people to make better lifestyle choices, to have that level of health and well-being that reduces the impact of the very things you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So, for example, cardiovascular problems, heart problems, blood pressure problems, diabetes, overweight, obesity, all those kind of traits which cause lung difficulties, atrophy of muscles and so on. So physical activity done right can reduce greatly the amount that an individual would suffer from those circumstances.
But at the end of the day, we all die. At the end of the day, when you do all this, at the end of the day, even some footballers who are very active, some athletes who are very active and so on, who you think, some of them even suffer cardiac arrest and die on the pitch. So sometimes I get confused. I really don't know what to believe and what not to believe. But yeah, you want to say something?
I do. I think that the one thing that's true, the moment we're born, we're already on our way to dying. That's true. But I think I would rather die tomorrow having fulfilled a very content and happy life than having lived a life full of struggle and stress. And that's the difference. That's what physical activity and these 24-hour movement behaviours would do for me. They allow me to make sure that when it is my time, that I can do that with a smile on my face, knowing that I've put something in the world that's helped.
Well, you had it from the horse's mouth, I may say. If you have not been exercising, it's a very interesting note for you to take care of yourself. Make sure you're exercising as an adult, as a child, every individual need to exercise. And I would agree with Doctor here that it helps to elongate our lives. Doctor, I want to ask, I know there is these parents here who would also ask the same question that I'm thinking of here. Some of the parents whose children have not been taking part in active exercises, and who would maybe, after listening to your special notes this evening, would want to begin to encourage their children to engage in exercise activity. How do you think they could start that process?
I think that we mentioned earlier how the environment that's around that child influences the decisions that they make.
Exactly.
So if the parents are not as active, then don't be surprised that the kids won't be active. So in my opinion, the best way the parents can do it is to be active themselves. To show them how it should be done.
Doctor, you are giving us an assignment. We are all parents here.
I mean, for example, the mother of my child and my children and myself, we've both been very active our whole lives, and we've both studied a lot. She's a medical doctor, and we've both studied a lot, and our children grew up just, that was the norm. So they wanted to be active. We never forced them into sport. We never forced them to do any studies. That was their choice. We said to them, if you stay active, you'll have a good life. If you study, you'll have more options in your life. But it's their decision. I think a lot of parents, they want to avoid the heartache of their children screaming at them that they don't want to do something. But actually, if you take them for a walk after dinner every night or something like this, that's physical activity. There are some very simple, cost-effective ways to make it happen. Not everybody is sporty. But we never mentioned sport, we said physical activity. It's not the same thing. So for example, you go to the shopping centre once a month, once a week, whatever your family circumstances are, to buy the big shop of food. Everybody wants to park as close to the front door as possible. I think this is really a crazy human behaviour. I always park at the furthest parking space away, and there's two reasons. One, I have to take many more steps to walk into the shop, then many more steps to walk back.
Yeah.
And apart from that, it's really easy to park your car. There's always a space.
No risk of scratching or hitting somebody. Yeah,
exactly.
Because always
So as much as we joke, little things like that adds to physical activity. Little things like if the child is going to school and you're one of the parents that drives the car, well, park the car 2 minutes from the school and walk with your child into the school, and when you collect them, walk them back again. There are simple things that can be done that are cost effective, that not only enhance your physical activity, but unbeknown to the child, enhances theirs at the same time. And then you just gradually build from there.
I think I've learned one thing now. The only time I park far away from the entrance into a shopping complex is whenever I buy a new car. That place, there are very few people who park there. So now I've learned that one. I should learn to take more steps into the shop and more steps out there. So it's a very good point. I know you have a clinic where you deal with these issues. What is your word out there to parents who have kids that are struggling with these conditions?
In terms of advice for these parents,
yes.
I think the advice I would say for the parents is that there are lots of great professionals out there who have lots of experience and knowledge on supporting children with a variety of different circumstances. I think the first thing I would advise parents to do is to talk to one of two people, either the class teacher that the child is in school with, or if the child is not at school yet, to speak to their local doctor, their general practitioner, and just to say that they have some concerns. Because schools and doctors are very well connected community networks, which can then make the right things fall into place to get the right support. Now, cost of living crisis, the financial position of our country right now is not great. So there's less funding available for those kids. And yet, as you said, there's an increase in the number of kids needing that support. So there are families that can afford private interventions, such as my clinic, which is privately based. So I guess parents have three choices: speak to the GP, speak to the classroom teacher, or try to identify people in the private industry, such as myself, who are very ethically in place to support their child and themselves as a family to move forward. So my advice is to not stay silent, to not think they're on their own, but there is support out there to help them move forward and to help their child's life get better too.
There is support out there. So if you need any support, you have had it this evening. There is support out there. And Dr. Andy here, if you have a child and that you want Dr. Andy to see, you can always reach out. You have our comment section. Send us or direct message us, and we would pass your communication across. And remember, you don't have to be in Scotland, you don't have to be in Glasgow, you don't have to be in England, you don't have to be in the UK, you don't have to be in Europe for you to access all this support. Dr. Andy, like he rightly mentioned, have sessions somewhere in the Middle East, in Dubai and all that. And again, there are organizations like the World Health Organization who are supporting communities around the world. So if you think you need all this support, there are help out there, there are support out there. Do your research. You can reach out to us. We can give you a list of links to access all this support and make sure that you have the right support and the ability to support your child.
So, final words from me. If you are a parent or intending parents, healthy lifestyle is very, very important. He's mentioned things that would impact a child, much as you are taking care of yourself. If you are pregnant, you're also taking care of the baby inside you. For young ones, we are old now, so we are not. So don't delay your starting up a family for a career for a latter years. Those things have some negative.
So if you have to do it now.
Do it now. If you have to do it now. I mean, my mother, when she was alive, she said the only thing that you would do, and they say you did it very quickly, is death. When you die, they say you died too quickly,
too early.
Too early. So anything you do, for any good thing you do, is not you can't be criticized for doing it very early. And again, physical activities, healthy lifestyle, and so on. I'm not sure we have time to go into dieting, but we're going to bring you again. Make a promise to us before the whole public.
I'll make a promise that I will come back.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful evening with you, Dr. Andy, and our followers and our subscribers would agree that this evening has been a fantastic episode, and we'll always promise you that we'll bring you the best. We will seek out those information, those professionals that would impact your life positively. I will bring them here and they will speak to you, and you will learn quite a lot from our episode. Continue to engage with us, continue to subscribe, continue to follow, continue to pass the message across to your friends, families, and well-wishers so that they can benefit from this inspirational and very educative sessions that we are bringing to you. And I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Andy, who has given us this opportunity this evening. If you know how busy Dr. Andy is, you will know that it's not easy to get him here.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, so,
last time I was trying to speak with you, he was all over Europe teaching.
Exactly,
so it was,
exactly.
Thank you so much. I don't take that for granted.
Listen, it's an absolute pleasure, and I'm happy to do it again.
All right. Thank you. And thank you once again for being with us and for staying with us this long. And I believe you have learned a lot this evening. If you have any question, like I said, send us your question in the comment section or direct message us or send us an email. We'll pick it up and we'll take it further from here. And on this note, from the crew here and all of us within Glasscast Podcast, I want to say a very big thank you for being part of this episode and for being part of what we do. And we'll see you in the next episode. Have a good evening.